An orphan stood up to a bully, unaware the bully's father would offer him a home. The words might have read like a simple headline to others, but for 12-year-old Elijah Foster, they were the invisible ink of his unwritten future. Words he couldn't yet read as he stood trembling in the shadow of Marcus Holloway's much larger frame. Rain pelted the cracked asphalt of Westridge Middle School's basketball court, turning Elijah's worn sneakers darker at the edges. His thin shoulders tense beneath a jacket 2 sizes too large, a hand-me-down from the donation bin at Pinewood Children's Home, where he'd lived since age 7. The jacket hung from his frame like borrowed courage, too big but necessary all the same. "I said give it back." Elijah's voice cracked, but he kept his eyes locked on the taller boy's face. The sketchbook clutched in Marcus's meaty hand contained the only pictures Elijah had of his mother. Drawings he'd created from fading memories, recreated again and again until they felt almost real. Marcus sneered, raindrops catching in his eyelashes. "What's wrong, foster care? Afraid I'll see your little doodles?" He flipped through the pages with deliberate slowness, his fingers leaving damp smudges on Elijah's careful lines. Around them, a small circle of students had gathered, their faces a blur of morbid curiosity. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody ever did. Elijah was the boy without parents, without a real home. The invisible boy who sat alone at lunch tables and whose name teachers sometimes forgot when taking attendance. "They're mine." Elijah's voice grew stronger, something unfamiliar rising in his chest, a warmth that pushed against years of carefully constructed silence. "You have no right. I have every right." Marcus's voice carried the easy confidence of someone who had never questioned his place in the world. "My dad's on the school board. My family built half this town. You're nothing but charity case." The rain fell harder now, turning the world into a grayscale painting. Elijah's socks were soaked through, his feet numb with cold, but the fire in his chest burned hotter. 5 years in the system had taught him to disappear, to make himself small, to survive by being forgotten. But his mother's face, the curve of her smile that he feared forgetting more with each passing year, was worth remembering, worth fighting for. "Give it back," each word punctuated by the thundering of his heart. A flash of surprise crossed Marcus's face, quickly replaced by anger. He held the sketchbook higher, taunting. "Come get it, orphan boy." The word orphan sliced through Elijah like winter wind. He lunged forward, all reason abandoned, hands outstretched for his precious book. Marcus, caught off guard by the sudden movement, stumbled backward, losing his footing on the wet surface. His larger body fell awkwardly, the back of his head connecting with the metal pole of the basketball hoop with a sickening sound that cut through the patter of rain. Silence fell. Even the rain seemed to pause. Marcus lay still, a small trickle of red mixing with rainwater beneath his head. The circle of students broke apart in panic. Someone shouted for a teacher. Elijah stood frozen, the sketchbook now lying in a puddle at his feet, pages swelling with rainwater, ink bleeding into abstract clouds. "I didn't mean to," he whispered to no one. His hands shook violently as he picked up his ruined drawings. "I didn't push him. I just wanted..." But no one was listening. They were all running toward the school building, leaving Elijah alone with the consequences of standing up for himself for the first time in years. Later, sitting on a hard plastic chair outside the principal's office, Elijah stared at his water-damaged sketchbook. The faces he'd drawn with such care had blurred beyond recognition, as if his mother was fading from his memory all over again. His stomach twisted with a sickening combination of guilt and loss. The door beside him opened, and Principal Whitmore's stern face appeared. "Come in, Elijah." The office smelled of coffee and furniture polish. Behind the large desk sat not only the principal, but also a man Elijah had never seen before. Tall, with salt and pepper hair, and the same strong jawline as Marcus. He wore an expensive-looking suit, slightly rumpled as if he'd rushed to get here. Elijah's throat closed up. This must be Marcus's father, the school board member, the man whose son was now in the hospital because of him. "Sit down," Principal Whitmore instructed, her voice neither kind nor unkind, merely professional. Elijah perched on the edge of the chair, unable to meet either adult's eyes. His damp clothes clung uncomfortably to his skin, and he clutched the ruined sketchbook to his chest like a shield. "This is Mr. Richard Holloway, Marcus's father." Principal Whitmore confirmed Elijah's fear. "Mr. Holloway, this is Elijah Foster." Elijah forced himself to look up, expecting anger, perhaps even hatred. Instead, he found himself caught in a gaze so intensely curious that it made him want to disappear all over again. "Mr. Holloway studied him with eyes the same deep brown as Marcus's, but without the cruelty Elijah had come to expect. "Marcus has a concussion, Mr." Holloway said finally, his voice lower and calmer than Elijah had anticipated. "He'll be okay, but he'll need to stay overnight for observation." "I'm sorry," Elijah whispered, the words falling from his lips before he could stop them. "I didn't mean for him to get hurt. I just wanted my book back, Mr." Holloway's eyes fell to the water-damaged sketchbook clutched against Elijah's chest. "May I?" He extended a hand. Everything in Elijah wanted to refuse, to protect what little remained of his precious drawings. But he couldn't see a way to deny this man whose son lay in a hospital bed because of him. Slowly, reluctantly, he handed over the sketchbook. "Mr." Holloway handled it with unexpected gentleness, carefully turning the warped pages. He paused at a drawing that had survived the water damage better than most. A woman with curly hair and Elijah's same amber eyes, laughing as she held a small boy on her lap. "Your mother?" he asked quietly. Elijah nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "You have talent, Mr." Holloway continued examining the drawings, his expression unreadable. "How long have you been at Pinewood?" The question startled Elijah. 5 years, sir." "And before that?" Elijah swallowed hard. "With my mom, until she got sick, Mr." Holloway nodded slowly, still looking at the drawings rather than at Elijah. "The school tells me this isn't the first time Marcus has taken your things." This wasn't at all what Elijah had expected. He glanced at Principal Whitmore, who was watching the exchange with a puzzled expression. "No, sir," Elijah admitted. "But it's the first time I've done anything about it, Mr." Holloway finally looked up, meeting Elijah's eyes again. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the edges that made Elijah feel suddenly, inexplicably seen. "I believe that," he said simply. He closed the sketchbook and handed it back to Elijah with careful hands. Then he turned to Principal Whitmore. "I don't think further disciplinary action is necessary, do you? It seems clear this was an accident resulting from my son's behavior, not Elijah's." Principal Whitmore blinked in surprise. "Mr. Holloway, while I understand your concern, school policy regarding physical altercations—" "Was there a physical altercation, Ms. Whitmore?" "Mr." Holloway's voice remained even, but something in his tone made the principal straighten in her chair. "From what I understand, my son fell while in possession of property he had taken from another student. Property, I might add, of significant personal value." He gestured toward Elijah's sketchbook. Elijah couldn't believe what he was hearing. Marcus's father was defending him? Nevertheless, Principal Whitmore began again. "The incident occurred during school hours on school property and has resulted in my son learning a valuable lesson about respecting others' belongings. Mr. Holloway stood up, effectively ending the conversation. "I appreciate your time, Miss Whitmore, but I have a son in the hospital to attend to, and it seems Elijah here needs dry clothes and perhaps some art supplies to replace what was damaged today." Principal Whitmore looked as though she wanted to say more, but thought better of it. "Very well, Mr. Holloway. Elijah, you may return to class." Elijah stood on shaky legs, still clutching his sketchbook. "Thank you," he mumbled, unsure if he was thanking the principal or Mr. Holloway or both. As he turned to leave, Mr. Holloway spoke again. "Elijah, may I have a word with you in the hallway first?" Outside the office, the corridor was empty and quiet. Classes in session behind closed doors. Elijah shifted uncomfortably under Mr. Holloway's gaze, waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the man to reveal his true feelings now that they were away from the principal. Instead, Mr. Holloway crouched slightly to be at eye level with Elijah. "I want to apologize for my son's behavior." The words were so unexpected that Elijah could only stare. "Marcus has been struggling since his mother passed away 3 years ago." A flash of grief crossed Mr. Holloway's face. "That's no excuse for bullying, and I want you to know I'll be addressing it with him directly." "But I thought you should know." "I'm sorry about your wife," Elijah said softly, the words feeling inadequate but necessary. Mr. Holloway's eyes widened slightly, as if surprised by the empathy from a boy his son had tormented. "Thank you." He paused, seeming to consider something. "I have a question for you, Elijah. Those drawings, do you do them from memory?" Elijah nodded. "I don't have any photos of her, just what I remember." Something in Mr. Holloway's expression changed, a decision being made. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to Elijah. "I'd like to speak with your caseworker at Pinewood, if that's all right with you." Elijah accepted the card, confusion evident on his face. "Am I in trouble?" "No, Mr. Holloway said firmly. "Quite the opposite. I think perhaps we could help each other." With that cryptic statement, he straightened and checked his watch. "I need to get back to the hospital. Take care of those drawings, Elijah. Talent like yours shouldn't go to waste." He walked away, leaving Elijah standing in the empty hallway, rainwater still dripping from his clothes onto the polished floor, wondering what had just happened and why his heart was suddenly beating with something that felt dangerously close to hope. 3 days passed before Elijah heard anything more about Marcus or his father. 3 days of whispered rumors in hallways, of sideways glances from teachers who'd clearly been told something, but weren't sharing. 3 days of Elijah trying to redraw his mother's face in a new sketchbook provided by Ms. Chen, his art teacher, who'd heard about what happened and quietly handed him fresh supplies with a gentle squeeze of his shoulder. On the 4th day, Miss Patterson, his caseworker, arrived at Pinewood during dinner. This was unusual. Her visits typically occurred on scheduled Tuesday afternoons, and today was Friday. Elijah watched from the dining hall as she spoke in hushed tones with Mr. Griffith, the home's director, both of them occasionally glancing in his direction. "Foster! Office!" Mr. Griffith's voice boomed across the room, causing several children to jump and all conversation to momentarily cease. Elijah set down his fork, appetite vanishing instantly. Had Mr. Holloway changed his mind? Was he pressing charges after all? The walk to Mr. Griffith's office felt endless. Inside, Ms. Patterson sat primly on one of the visitor chairs, her perpetually harried expression softened by something Elijah couldn't quite identify. "Sit down, Elijah," Mr. Griffith said, gesturing to the empty chair. "Miss Patterson has some news to discuss with you." Elijah perched on the edge of the seat, hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Is this about what happened at school? With Marcus?" Miss Patterson adjusted her glasses. "In a manner of speaking, yes. I've had a very interesting conversation with Mr. Richard Holloway." Elijah's stomach twisted. Here it comes, he thought. "Mr. Holloway has expressed interest in becoming a foster parent." Ms. Patterson continued. "Specifically, he's interested in fostering you." The words hung in the air, incomprehensible at first. Elijah blinked, certain he'd misheard. "Me?" he finally managed. "But his son, Marcus, hates me." Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Griffith exchanged glances. "According to Mr. Holloway, Marcus has expressed remorse for his behavior," Mrs. Patterson said carefully. "Apparently, your encounter led to some significant conversations between father and son." "I don't understand," Elijah whispered. None of this made sense. People like the Holloways, wealthy, important people, didn't take in kids like him. And bullies like Marcus didn't suddenly feel remorse. Mr. Holloway was very forthcoming about the situation, Miss Patterson continued. He explained about the incident at school, about Marcus's behavior since losing his mother, and about how impressed he was with your artistic ability and your Kichinukasa character, I believe he said. Elijah's mind raced, trying to process this information. But why would he want me to live with them? Mr. Griffith leaned forward, his usual gruffness tempered. Mr. Holloway believes his son needs someone like you in his life, Elijah. Someone who stands up for what matters. And he believes you deserve better opportunities than what we can provide here. The unspoken truth hung in the air. That Pinewood, for all its efforts, was overcrowded and underfunded. A place where children's basic needs were met, but little else. Of course, Miss Patterson added quickly, this would be a trial placement. You would have regular check-ins with me, and if at any point you felt uncomfortable or unsafe, you would be brought back here immediately. Elijah stared at his hands, unable to articulate the hurricane of emotions swirling inside him. Hope and suspicion warred within his chest. Was this some elaborate trick? A way for Marcus to torment him more efficiently? Or was it possible, just possible, that something good could come from that rainy day on the basketball court? You don't have to decide right now, Miss Patterson said gently, misinterpreting his silence as reluctance. Take some time to think about it. When? Elijah asked, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry? He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. When would I go? If I said yes? Miss Patterson's expression softened further. Mr. Holloway has already completed the emergency foster parent certification. If you agree, you could go as early as Sunday. Sunday, 2 days away. Elijah's mind spun with the possibilities. A real house. Maybe his own room. Art supplies that didn't come from donation bins. But also Marcus. The thought sent a chill through him. Elijah hesitated. Can I talk to Mr. Holloway first? And Marcus? Before I decide? Ms. Patterson smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her in all the years she'd managed his case. I think that's very wise, Elijah. Mr. Holloway suggested the same thing. He's offered to take you to dinner tomorrow evening, if that's acceptable. Elijah nodded slowly, still trying to process everything. Okay, good. Ms. Patterson stood, gathering her perpetually overflowing folder of paperwork. I'll pick you up at 5 tomorrow. Try to wear something nice. After they left, Elijah remained seated, staring at the wall of Mr. Griffith's office where a faded motivational poster proclaimed, "Your future is what you make it," above a soaring eagle. For the first time in 5 years, those words didn't feel like mockery. The restaurant was nicer than anywhere Elijah had been before. Soft lighting cast a warm glow over white tablecloths, and quiet conversations hummed beneath instrumental music. He tugged self-consciously at the collar of his button-up shirt, his only nice clothing reserved for court appearances and rare special occasions. Mr. Holloway sat across from him, looking somehow both formidable and approachable, in a casual sweater that probably cost more than everything in Elijah's small duffel bag of possessions. But what truly captured Elijah's attention was Marcus, seated beside his father, eyes downcast, unusually subdued. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Elijah," Mr. Holloway said after they'd ordered drinks, soda for the boys, coffee for himself. "I imagine this must feel quite strange." "Yes, sir," Elijah replied, unable to think of anything more eloquent to say. His eyes kept darting to Marcus, who had yet to look directly at him. "I believe in being straightforward," Mr. Holloway continued, "so I'll tell you exactly why I'm proposing this arrangement." He placed his hands flat on the table. "Marcus lost his mother 3 years ago. I lost my wife. And in our grief, I'm afraid we both lost our way a bit." At this, Marcus shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. "When I saw your drawings, the ones of your mother, something clicked for me." Mr. Holloway's voice softened. "You found a way to keep your memories alive, to process your loss through art. It's a healthier approach than what we've managed." Elijah glanced at Marcus again, surprised to find the other boy finally looking at him, an unreadable expression on his face. "Marcus has agreed to tell you himself why he thinks this might be a good idea," Mr. Holloway said, nodding encouragingly at his son. Marcus cleared his throat, looking as uncomfortable as Elijah felt. "I'm sorry," he began, the words sounding rehearsed but not insincere, "for taking your sketchbook, and for all the other stuff before that." Elijah nodded slightly, unsure how to respond. "When I hit my head," Marcus continued, a hand unconsciously rising to touch the back of his skull, where a small bandage was still visible beneath his hair. "The doctor said I was lucky. Could have been a lot worse." He paused, swallowing hard. "Dad came to the hospital, and instead of being mad at you, he was mad at me. Made me really think about stuff." Mr. Holloway watched his son with an expression of gentle encouragement. "Anyway," Marcus continued, clearly struggling, "I've been a jerk because I'm angry all the time since Mom died. And Dad thinks maybe..." He looked to his father for help. "I think," Mr. Holloway took over smoothly, "that Marcus could learn a great deal from someone who has faced loss with grace and found constructive ways to cope. And I think perhaps you might benefit from a stable home environment where your talents could flourish." Elijah's hands twisted in his lap beneath the table. "But why me? There are lots of kids at Pinewood. Because you stood up to my son when no one else would," Mr. Holloway said simply. "That takes courage. And because when I apologize for Marcus's behavior, you expressed sympathy for our loss rather than resentment." He leaned forward slightly. "Character is revealed in difficult moments, Elijah. Yours impressed me." The waiter arrived with their drinks, temporarily halting the conversation. Elijah used the moment to collect his thoughts, which were racing in conflicting directions. Part of him yearned desperately for what Mr. Holloway was offering, a real home, support for his art, a chance at something better than the institutional future that typically awaited kids who aged out of the system. But another part remained wary, unable to forget years of Marcus's taunts and cruelty. What if it doesn't work out?" Elijah asked after the waiter departed. "What if..." He glanced at Marcus. "What if we can't get along?" "A fair question," Mr. Holloway nodded. "This would be a trial placement. Ms. Patterson would check in regularly, and you could return to Pinewood at any time if you felt it wasn't working." He paused. "But I hope you'll give us a chance to prove ourselves." "I'll stay out of your way," Marcus added unexpectedly. "If that's what you want." The statement hung in the air between them, Not quite friendly, but a concession nonetheless. I don't know what I want, Elijah admitted. This is all happening really fast. Mr. Holloway nodded understanding. You don't have to decide tonight. Take some time to think about it. But I want you to know that our home is open to you, should you choose to accept. They ordered dinner, the conversation shifting to lighter topics: school, Elijah's art, the upcoming basketball season that Marcus played in. To Elijah's surprise, the tension gradually eased as the meal progressed. Marcus even cracked a genuine smile at one point when Elijah admitted he knew nothing about basketball. Maybe I could teach you, Marcus offered, the words emerging awkwardly but seemingly sincere. If you wanted. By the time dessert arrived, a chocolate cake that made Elijah's eyes widen, something had shifted. Not dramatically, not completely, but enough that when Mr. Holloway asked again, "What do you think, Elijah? Would you be willing to give us a try?" The answer came more easily than he would have expected. "Yes," he said quietly. "I think I would." The smile that spread across Mr. Holloway's face held a warmth that reminded Elijah, with a bittersweet pang, of his mother. "Excellent. I'll call Miss Patterson tonight." As they walked to the car afterward, Marcus fell into step beside Elijah, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "It won't be weird forever," he said quietly, so his father walking ahead wouldn't hear. "Just so you know." Elijah glanced at him, surprised. "No?" Marcus shrugged. "Dad says adjusting takes time, but he's pretty smart about stuff like that." A pause. "And I really am sorry. About your drawings, it wasn't a promise of friendship. It wasn't even a guarantee of peace." But as Elijah climbed into the back seat of Mr. Holloway's car for the ride back to Pinewood, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a very long time. The tentative, fragile beginning of possibility. The Holloway house stood at the end of a tree-lined street, its red brick facade and wraparound porch more welcoming than imposing, despite its obvious grandeur. Elijah stared up at it through the car window, his small duffel bag clutched to his chest, wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake. "Home sweet home, Mr. Holloway announced as he parked in the circular driveway. "Marcus, why don't you show Elijah to his room while I bring in his things?" Marcus nodded, leading the way up the front steps without checking if Elijah was following. Inside, the house smelled of lemon polish and something baking, cookies maybe. The entryway opened to a large living room with comfortable-looking furniture and walls lined with bookshelves. "Kitchen's that way." Marcus pointed vaguely to the right. "Dad's office is off limits unless he invites you in. Bedrooms are upstairs." Elijah followed silently, taking in the family photos lining the staircase wall. Marcus as a small child, beaming between his parents. Mr. Holloway in fishing gear holding up a large catch. A beautiful dark-haired woman, who must be Marcus's mother, laughing at something off camera. The second-floor hallway had 4 doors, all closed except one at the far end. "That's Dad's room." Marcus indicated the door at the end. "That's mine." He pointed to a door with a basketball poster taped to it. "Bathroom's there. And this." He pushed open the remaining door. "Is yours, I guess." The room was larger than any Elijah had ever had to himself. A queen-sized bed with a blue comforter dominated one wall, while a desk and empty bookshelf stood against another. The walls were a soft gray, undecorated except for a single-frame print of a cityscape at night. "Dad said we could get different stuff for it if you want," Marcus said, watching Elijah's reaction. "Paint or whatever." "It's perfect," Elijah whispered, unable to believe this entire space belonged to him alone. At Pinewood, he'd shared a room with 3 other boys, his personal space limited to a narrow bed and a small metal locker. Mr. Holloway appeared in the doorway, carrying Elijah's duffel and a shopping bag. "I hope the room is suitable. We can personalize it more once you've settled in." "It's amazing," Elijah said honestly. "Thank you. I picked up a few things I thought you might need." Mr. Holloway placed the shopping bag on the bed. Toiletries, some school supplies, and this. He pulled out a large sketchbook in a wooden box that, when opened, revealed professional quality colored pencils and charcoals. Elijah stared at the art supplies, hands hovering over them reverently. "These are... I can't..." "Of course you can," Mr. Holloway said firmly. "Consider it a welcome gift." From the doorway, Marcus watched the exchange with an unreadable expression before muttering, "I've got homework," and retreating to his own room. Mr. Holloway sighed softly. "He's trying in his way. Give him time." He checked his watch. "I'll let you get settled. Dinner will be ready at 6. Nothing fancy tonight, just lasagna. My housekeeper misses." Winters comes weekdays to cook and clean, but she's off on weekends. After Mr. Holloway left, Elijah sat on the edge of the bed, running his fingers over the soft comforter. Everything felt surreal. The spacious room, the expensive art supplies, the knowledge that somewhere downstairs, a home-cooked meal was waiting for him. Part of him waited for the illusion to shatter, for someone to appear and tell him there had been a mistake, that none of this was meant for him. He carefully unpacked his few possessions, worn clothes that looked even shabbier in this elegant room. His old sketchbook with its water-damaged pages, a small wooden box containing his mother's necklace, and a few other treasures he'd managed to keep through years of being shuffled between placements. When everything was put away, Elijah sat at the desk and opened the new sketchbook. The paper was thick and creamy, nothing like the thin pages he was used to. He selected a pencil from the wooden box, testing its weight in his hand, and began to draw. He didn't plan what would appear on the page. His hand moved almost of its own accord, and gradually his mother's face emerged. Her kind eyes, the slight curve of her smile, the way her hair fell around her face. But this time the drawing felt different, less desperate somehow. Less like he was fighting against forgetting, and more like he was honoring remembering. A soft knock interrupted his concentration. Mr. Holloway stood in the doorway, his expression softening as he glimpsed the drawing. "Dinner's ready," he said gently. Elijah carefully closed the sketchbook. Coming. The dining room table was set for 3, the lasagna steaming in the center alongside a bowl of salad. Marcus was already seated, scrolling through his phone with disinterest. "Phones away at dinner, Mr. Holloway reminded him as he took his seat at the head of the table. Marcus complied with minimal eye-rolling. Elijah sat across from Marcus, hands folded in his lap, waiting for cues on how to proceed. At Pinewood, meals were chaotic affairs with 20 children jostling for space and attention. This formal setting with its matching plates and cloth napkins felt foreign. "We usually serve ourselves," Mr. Holloway explained, noticing Elijah's hesitation. He passed the lasagna. "Take as much as you'd like." Dinner conversation was stilted at first. Mr. Holloway asked about school, about subjects they enjoyed, about upcoming tests. Marcus answered in monosyllables. Elijah offered polite, careful responses. But gradually, as Mr. Holloway shared a funny story about a client at his law firm, the atmosphere lightened slightly. "Elijah," Mr. Holloway said as they finished eating, "I've enrolled you in the same school as Marcus, effective tomorrow. I hope that's all right. I thought keeping some continuity would be best." "Yes, sir." "Thank you. Marcus will show you around," Mr. Holloway continued, giving his son a pointed look. Marcus nodded, though his enthusiasm was clearly limited. "Yeah, sure. And one more thing," Mr. Holloway added, his tone becoming more serious. "In this house, we're honest with each other. If something makes you uncomfortable or unhappy, I expect you to say so. Bathe or both of you." He looked between the boys. "Clear." "Clear," they echoed, not quite in unison. Later, lying in bed beneath the soft comforter, staring at the unfamiliar shadows on the ceiling, Elijah tried to process everything that had happened. 1 week ago, he'd been just another forgotten child at Pinewood, enduring Marcus's bullying, drawing his mother's face over and over to keep her memory alive. Now he was in a beautiful home with his own room, expensive art supplies, and the very bully who had tormented him sleeping just across the hall. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. But as sleep finally claimed him, Elijah allowed himself to hope, just a little, that maybe it didn't need to make sense to be real. The first week passed in a blur of adjustments. School was simultaneously easier and harder. Easier because Marcus maintained a cool but protective distance that kept other potential bullies at bay. Harder because Elijah was now the foster kid living with the Holloways, a subject of endless curiosity and speculation. At home, they fell into an uneasy routine. Breakfast was usually a rushed affair with Mr. Holloway distributing lunch money and reminders about after-school activities. Evenings were more structured. Homework at the dining room table under Mr. Holloway's occasional supervision. Dinner together with the no phones. Rule strictly enforced, then free time until a reasonable bedtime. Elijah spent most of his free time in his room drawing. Sometimes landscapes from memory. The park where his mother used to take him. The view from his old apartment window. Sometimes people, his mother always, but now occasionally others. Mr. Holloway concentrating over legal briefs at the dinner table, Mrs. Winters humming as she prepared dinner, even Marcus during rare unguarded moments. It was on the 8th day that something shifted. Elijah was sketching in the backyard, trying to capture the way sunlight filtered through the oak tree's leaves, when Marcus appeared, basketball in hand. "Dad's working late," he announced, bouncing the ball idly. "Mrs. Winters left dinner in the oven." "Okay," Elijah responded, returning to his drawing. He expected Marcus to leave for the driveway where a basketball hoop was mounted, but instead, the other boy hovered nearby. "Wahi, what are you drawing?" Marcus finally asked, his voice carefully casual. Elijah hesitated, then turned the sketchbook so Marcus could see. "Just the tree." The light was interesting. Marcus studied the drawing, his expression unreadable. "It's good," he said finally. "Really good." The compliment, unexpected and seemingly genuine, caught Elijah off guard. "Thanks." An awkward silence fell between them. Marcus bounced his basketball once, twice. "Want to play?" he offered abruptly. "I could teach you some basics." Elijah glanced at his drawing, then back at Marcus. This was the first real overture since he'd arrived. "I'll probably be terrible." The corner of Marcus's mouth quirked up. "Yeah, probably. But everyone's terrible at first." Elijah carefully closed his sketchbook and set it aside. "Okay then." They moved to the driveway where Marcus demonstrated how to hold the ball, how to position for a shot, how to dribble without looking down. "You're keeping your eyes on the ball too much," Marcus corrected. "You need to feel it, not watch it." Elijah tried again, the ball escaping his control almost immediately and rolling into the flower bed. "Sorry," he muttered, retrieving it quickly. "It's fine. Try again." They continued for nearly an hour, Elijah gradually improving from completely hopeless to merely bad. To his surprise, Marcus proved to be a patient teacher, demonstrating techniques repeatedly without showing frustration. "Not bad for a first try," Marcus said as they finally headed inside, the setting sun casting long shadows across the lawn. "You've got decent hand-eye coordination, probably from all the drawing." In the kitchen, they found a casserole keeping warm in the oven and a note from Mrs. Winters with reheating instructions. Working together without discussion, they set the table and served the food, falling into the now familiar dinner routine despite Mr. Holloway's absence. "How come you never fought back before?" Marcus asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence that had developed. "When I was... before?" Elijah set down his fork, considering the question. "I didn't think it would help," he said finally. "In foster care, you learn pretty quick that making waves usually makes things worse." Marcus nodded slowly, digesting this. "So why that day? With the sketchbook?" "Because they were all I had left of her," Elijah said simply. "My mom. I couldn't let them get ruined." A bitter irony, considering what had happened anyway. Marcus pushed food around his plate. "I didn't know they were drawings of your mom," he said quietly. "I just thought they were like random sketches." "Would it have mattered?" Elijah asked, not accusingly, but with genuine curiosity. Marcus considered this, his expression troubled. "I don't know. Maybe." He set down his fork. "After my mom died, I broke a lot of stuff. Her things. I was so angry." His voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Dad kept this perfume bottle of hers. It was her favorite. One day I smashed it just to hurt him. The whole house smelled like her for days." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and unexpected. "I get it," Elijah said finally. "Being angry she's gone." Marcus looked up, something like recognition flickering in his eyes. "Yeah." They finished dinner in silence, but it was different now. Not the awkward silence of strangers forced together, but the quieter understanding of two people who had glimpsed something familiar in each other's pain. When Mr. Holloway returned home later that evening, he found them in the living room, Marcus playing a video game, Elijah sketching quietly in the armchair nearby, not interacting directly but coexisting peacefully in the same space. He paused in the doorway, watching them for a moment, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Everything okay here?" he asked. Both boys looked up, nodding. "Marcus is teaching me basketball," Elijah offered. "I'm pretty terrible." "He's not completely hopeless," Marcus countered, the faintest trace of a genuine smile appearing. "Just mostly." Mr. Holloway's eyes moved between them, noting the subtle shift. "Well, that sounds like progress to me." And it was. As weeks turned into months, the tentative truce between the boys gradually evolved into something resembling friendship. Not the easy, instantaneous bond that sometimes forms between children, but a more careful, deliberate connection built on small moments of shared understanding. Basketball lessons continued, Elijah's skills improving incrementally, In exchange, he showed Marcus some basic drawing techniques when the other boy expressed curiosity about how Elijah created such realistic portraits. "It's about really seeing," Elijah explained, guiding Marcus's hand as they sketched a simple apple. "Not what you think an apple looks like, but what this specific apple actually looks like right now, with this light from this angle." School dynamics shifted too. Where once Elijah had been invisible or a target, he now existed in the protective orbit of the Holloway name. It wasn't exactly popularity, but it was a kind of safety he'd never experienced before. Mr. Holloway watched the evolving relationship between the boys with quiet satisfaction, intervening only when necessary, allowing them space to navigate their new dynamic. He enrolled Elijah in proper art classes at a local studio, driving him there each Saturday morning and returning hours later to find him absorbed in projects, happier and more animated than when he'd arrived. The first real test of their fragile new family unit came 3 months after Elijah's arrival, when Mrs. Patterson visited for her quarterly evaluation. "How are things going, Elijah?" she asked during their private conversation in his room. "Are you comfortable here?" Elijah glanced around at the space that had become undeniably his. Walls now adorned with his artwork, shelves filled with art books. Mr. Holloway had given him, desk organized with his growing collection of supplies. "Yes," he said with certainty. "It's good here." "Me..." Patterson smiled, making notes in her ever-present folder. "And your relationship with Marcus?" "I understand there was some history there." Elijah considered the question carefully. "It was weird at first," he admitted. "But it's better now. He's different at home than he was at school." "Different how?" "Less angry," Elijah said after a moment. "Or maybe just better at dealing with it. We both are, I think." Miss Patterson's expression softened. "That's wonderful to hear, Elijah. And Mr. Holloway? How are things with him?" "He's kind," Elijah said simply. "He listens, and he doesn't treat me differently than Marcus." After Miss Patterson left, having given her approval for the placement to continue, Mr. Holloway suggested they celebrate with dinner at Elijah's choice of restaurant. "Really? Anywhere?" Elijah asked, still unaccustomed to such freedom of choice. "Within reason," Mr. Holloway smiled. "Probably not Paris tonight." They ended up at a pizza place Elijah had mentioned liking once, months earlier. Mr. Holloway remembered, just as he seemed to remember every small detail Elijah shared about his preferences in past. Over pepperoni pizza, Marcus recounted a story from school that had them all laughing. Elijah watched the father and son interact, the easy rhythm of their conversation, the shared mannerisms he'd come to recognize, the way Mr. Holloway's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. For a brief, painful moment, he felt like an intruder witnessing something he could never truly be part of. Mr. Holloway must have noticed the shift in his expression. "Everything okay, Elijah?" "Yeah," he said quickly, reaching for another slice. "Just thinking." Later that night, unable to sleep, Elijah sat at his desk drawing by the soft glow of his lamp. Without consciously deciding to, he began sketching the scene from dinner. Mr. Holloway and Marcus laughing together, the pizza between them, the comfortable familiarity of family. A soft knock at his door startled him. Mr. Holloway stood there in a robe, concern evident on his face. "Trouble sleeping?" he asked, entering when Elijah nodded. He glanced at the drawing. "May I?" Elijah hesitated, then pushed the sketchbook toward him. Mr. Holloway studied it silently for a long moment. "You have a gift for capturing moments," he said finally. "The feeling of them, not just how they looked." "Thank you." Mr. Holloway sat on the edge of the bed. "Something's bothering you." "Has been since dinner." Elijah shrugged, uncomfortable with the direct approach, but knowing Mr. Holloway wouldn't let it go. In this house, they talked about things. That was the rule. "It's stupid," he muttered. "I doubt that." Elijah stared at his hands. "Sometimes I feel like I'm pretending. Like I'm playing a part in your family, but I'm not really part of it." Mr. Holloway finished gently when Elijah trailed off. A small nod. Mr. Holloway was quiet for a moment. "Family isn't just about blood, Elijah. It's about choice too. Every day we choose who we let into our hearts, who we protect, who we make space for." He tapped the drawing lightly. "You didn't draw yourself here." Elijah looked up, surprised by the observation. "But you were there," Mr. Holloway continued. "An essential part of that moment. Just as you've become an essential part of this home. But Marcus is your son," Elijah said, the words carrying the weight of his unspoken fear. "Yes, he is." Mr. Holloway agreed. And that will never change. He met Elijah's eyes directly. But there's room in a heart for more than one person, Elijah. Room in a family for more than one child. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Miss Patterson mentioned that if things continue to go well, we might discuss more permanent arrangements in the future. Mr. Holloway said carefully, if that's something you might want. Elijah's breath caught. You mean, like adoption? Like adoption, Mr. Holloway confirmed. But only if it's what you want. Only if this feels like home to you. Home. The word resonated inside Elijah, familiar yet foreign. Home had been a series of temporary placements, shared rooms, borrowed belongings. Home had been a concept lost with his mother. I don't know what to say, he whispered truthfully. You don't have to say anything now, Mr. Holloway assured him. It's just something to think about. Something I've been thinking about. He stood gently squeezing Elijah's shoulder. Try to get some sleep. And maybe next time, draw yourself in the picture too. Where you belong. After Mr. Holloway left, Elijah turned back to the drawing. With careful strokes, he added a third figure to the scene. Himself, seated at the table. Part of the moment, part of the family. It felt both presumptuous and right, terrifying and hopeful. For the first time since his mother died, Elijah fell asleep with the word home echoing comfortably in his mind. 6 months to the day after Elijah moved into the Holloway house, Marcus knocked on his bedroom door. An unusual occurrence despite their improved relationship. Dad wants us downstairs, he said, lingering awkwardly in the doorway. Says he has something important to discuss. Elijah followed Marcus to the living room where Mr. Holloway waited, looking uncharacteristically nervous. On the coffee table lay a folder and what appeared to be legal documents. Sit down, boys, he said, gesturing to the couch. When they were seated, he took a deep breath. Elijah, when you came to live with us 6 months ago, I had hopes that this arrangement would benefit everyone involved. I believe it has. Elijah nodded, a knot of anxiety forming in his stomach. Was this leading to bad news? Had he done something wrong? Marcus and I have been talking, Mr. Holloway continued, glancing at his son, about making your place in this family permanent. The knot in Elijah's stomach tightened further. He looked at Marcus, trying to gauge his reaction, but the other boy's expression was carefully neutral. These are adoption papers, Mr. Holloway indicated the documents on the table. If you're willing, Elijah, we'd like to make it official. Make you legally part of this family. Elijah stared at the papers, unable to process the words fully. You want to adopt me? Yes, Mr. Holloway said simply. We do. Both of you. Elijah looked at Marcus again, needing to hear it from him directly. Marcus shifted uncomfortably under the direct question, but met Elijah's eyes. Yeah, he said, his voice gruff but sincere. Both of us. You don't have to decide right now. Mr. Holloway added quickly. This is a big decision. You can take all the time you need to think about it. Elijah reached for the papers with trembling hands, skimming the legal language without really comprehending it. His eyes caught on phrases like permanent guardianship, and legal name change, and irrevocable. I would take your mother's last name, Mr. Holloway explained gently, seeing where Elijah's attention had paused. You'd be Elijah Foster Holloway if you wanted, or you could keep just Foster. That would be entirely your choice. Foster Holloway, Elijah repeated softly, testing how it felt on his tongue. Like I said, there's no rush to decide, Mr. Holloway assured him. I just wanted you to know that the option is there, whenever you're ready. Elijah nodded, still overwhelmed. Can I think about it? Of course, Mr. Holloway smiled. Take all the time you need. Later that evening, Elijah sat on his bed, the adoption papers spread out before him, trying to make sense of the emotions swirling inside him. Part of him wanted to sign immediately, to grab hold of this miracle with both hands before it could disappear. Another part hesitated, haunted by the ghost of his mother and the fear of somehow betraying her memory by becoming someone else's son. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. To his surprise, it was Marcus. Can I come in? He asked, unusually tentative. Elijah nodded, gathering the papers into a neater pile to make room. Marcus sat on the desk chair, fidgeting slightly. So, about the adoption thing. Yeah, I just wanted to say, Marcus paused, clearly struggling. I know I was awful to you before, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't want to be stuck with me as a brother. The word brother hung in the air between them, new and startling. It's not that, Elijah said after a moment. It's not about you. Not anymore. Then what? Elijah gestured vaguely at his sketchbook on the desk. My mom. I'm afraid if I become someone else's son, I'm somehow forgetting her. Replacing her. Understanding dawned on Marcus's face. I get that, he said quietly. After my mom died, Dad dated this woman for a while. I was horrible to her. Thought if I let someone else be motherly, I'd be betraying Mom somehow. Elijah looked up, surprised by the parallel. What happened? Marcus shrugged. Dad broke it off, said I wasn't ready. But later, when I calmed down, I realized Mom wouldn't have wanted us to be alone forever, just to prove we missed her. He stood, moving to Elijah's desk where he picked up the sketchbook, flipping to a recent drawing of Elijah's mother. Inashish, you're not going to forget her, he said with unusual gentleness. You keep her alive in these. He tapped the drawing. Better than I've kept my mom's memory alive. Elijah stared at the familiar face he'd drawn so many times. I'm scared, he admitted. What if it doesn't work out? What if your dad changes his mind? He won't, Marcus said with absolute certainty. That's not who he is. They sat in silence for a moment, the possibility of brotherhood hanging between them, no longer unthinkable, but still new and undefined. For what it's worth, Marcus said finally, heading toward the door, I think Foster Holloway sounds pretty good. After he left, Elijah turned back to the adoption papers, reading them more carefully now. His eyes lingered on the signature line where, if he chose, he would sign away his status as a foster child forever, where he would officially become someone's son again, someone's brother. He picked up his sketchbook, turning to a blank page. Without planning it, he began to draw. Not his mother this time, but a new composition, 3 figures standing together. Mr. Holloway in the center, with an arm around each boy, a family portrait of what could be. As the image took shape beneath his pencil, something settled in Elijah's chest. Not a resolution yet, but the beginning of one. A recognition that perhaps his mother's love and his new family weren't opposing forces, but complementary ones. That perhaps she would want this for him, this chance at belonging again. He fell asleep with the drawing unfinished but promising on his desk, the adoption papers neatly stacked beside it, waiting for his decision. The day Elijah signed the adoption papers was ordinary in every way, except the one that mattered most. No special ceremony, no dramatic declarations, just the 4 of them in a judge's chambers on a Tuesday afternoon. Elijah, Mr. Holloway, Marcus, and Ms. Patterson, whose genuine smile betrayed how rare such happy endings were in her line of work. Congratulations, Elijah Foster Holloway, the judge said warmly after the final signature was in place. And congratulations to the whole Holloway family. They celebrated with ice cream afterward, sitting in the park as the summer sun warmed their shoulders. Marcus and Elijah wandered off to the basketball court while Mr. Holloway, Dad, Elijah was trying to learn to call him, watched from a bench, talking quietly with Ms. Patterson before she departed with a final hug for Elijah. Best 2 out of 3? Marcus challenged, dribbling the ball they'd brought from the car. You'll win anyway. Elijah laughed but took his position on the court. To everyone's surprise, especially his own, Elijah scored the winning point in their impromptu game. As the ball swished through the net, Marcus's look of shocked indignation dissolved into reluctant admiration. When did you get decent at this? He demanded. Elijah shrugged, unable to suppress his grin. Must be genetic. It's official now, right? I'm a Holloway. Marcus rolled his eyes, but there was no malice in it. Yeah. Don't get cocky. I still beat you 99% of the time. Boys! Their father called from the bench. One more stop before we head home. The one more stop turned out to be a small art supplies store Elijah had admired but never entered, deterred by the obviously high-end prices visible in the window displays. Pick out anything you want, Dad told him as they stepped inside. Consider it an adoption gift. Elijah wandered the aisles in awe, touching brushes and papers with reverent fingers, while Marcus trailed behind, making occasional sarcastic comments about paint colors with names like burnt sienna and Prussian blue. An hour later, they emerged with bags containing professional-grade watercolors, specialty papers, and brushes Elijah had only dreamed of owning. The total cost had made him flinch, but Dad had simply handed over his credit card without comment. Thank you, Elijah said softly as they loaded the purchases into the car. For everything. Dad's hand came to rest on his shoulder, warm and steady. You're welcome, son. The word son still felt new, both familiar and strange, like a coat that hadn't quite molded to his shape yet, but it was beginning to fit. At home that evening, Elijah sat at his desk surrounded by his new supplies, trying to decide where to begin. A knock at his door revealed Marcus, hovering uncertainly in the hallway. "Can I watch?" he asked, nodding toward the art supplies. "You don't have to let me, but I'm curious how that fancy stuff works." Elijah hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Sure. You can even try if you want." Marcus sat beside him, and together they experimented with the new watercolors, Elijah demonstrating techniques as they went. Their shoulders occasionally bumped as they leaned over the paper, comfortable now in each other's space in a way that would have been unimaginable a year ago. "What's your story, or what are you going to paint first?" "Like for real?" Marcus asked as they cleaned up later. Elijah considered the question. "I think a family portrait. All of us." Marcus nodded, understanding the significance. "Well, cool. Can I see it when it's done?" "You can see it while I'm working on it," Elijah offered. "If you want." Another nod, this one accompanied by a small smile. "Yeah, I'd like that." Later that night, as the house settled into quiet, Elijah stood at his window looking out at the stars. He thought about the strange, unpredictable path that had led him here. From loss to loneliness to an unexpected confrontation on a rainy basketball court that had somehow, improbably, given him a family again. On his desk lay his mother's necklace, now accompanied by a framed photograph of her that Dad had helped him locate through his old social worker. A small miracle Elijah hadn't thought possible. Beside it sat his sketchbook, open to a fresh page where he'd begun the preliminary lines of the family portrait he'd promised Marcus. 3 figures were taking shape on the page, a father and 2 sons. Not a replacement for what he'd lost, but something new, something that could exist alongside his memories rather than erasing them. Elijah Foster Holloway turned from the window and returned to his desk, picking up a pencil with steady hands. He had a family to draw, and this time he'd include himself in the picture, right where he belonged.